The fastest 30 caliber cartridges in the world. That's right, folks. I'm finally doing this episode. I've been talking about doing it forever, and I just never got around to doing it. But now we're finally doing it. We're going over 8 cartridges today. Here they all are next to me in no particular order. If you'd like, you can pause the video and put them in whatever order you think they might go in. Make your predictions and stick around till the end and let me know in the comments if you just think I was wrong or if you were right and you got the same order as me. As usual, we're going to be going in order from slowest to fastest, as that's the most interesting way to do it, and that hopefully keeps y'all captivated long enough to stay till the end of the video. We're going to be keeping it pretty brief with these. We're pretty much just going to go over a little bit of why it was made, or a little bit of the history of it, and maybe a little bit of specs about it, and then just cover the speed, because we have 8 to do today, and I don't want this to be a super long video, so we're going to be keeping it pretty brief with all of these cartridges. Now, as for the source of most of my information, a lot of it will be coming from the Nozzler Low Data website, and that is only because they had a plethora of options that they tested, and they did a bunch of max loads and used very light projectiles, and this is a speed episode, so I use them. Not to mention, it also makes my life that much easier to live because I could get it all from the same website. How do you do, folks, and welcome back to Chambered in History. We're going over the story of cartridges that made history themselves. From back-of-the-drawer relics to big bore bruisers, we're cracking open the brass cases and spilling out the history. Once again, before we get into it, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being here. Without you, this wouldn't be nearly as fun, as I've mentioned many times before. Also, I've heard your comments and your complaints about how long my intros are, and I apologize about that. I know the last one, the intro was like 5 minutes long. Today's will be much shorter, and from here forward, they should be much shorter. Also, I know I haven't posted in 3 weeks. I went to record this video last week. I just couldn't do it for some reason. I mean, I was like 40 minutes in, and I was still in like the first paragraph. I just couldn't do it. I don't know why. So I do apologize for that. I did make a community post apologizing and saying that I would be skipping that week. But yeah, I'm finally doing it today, so hopefully everything goes well and we get an episode out. Also, Merry Christmas, because this episode should be coming out on Christmas Eve. So I hope all of you have a very happy holidays, and we'll see you next year. But don't forget to like, comment, and hit that subscribe button to help us reach our 10,000 subscriber goal, as well as to stay up to date on all of our cartridge adventures and everything in between. But with all that out of the way, let's get into why you actually clicked on this video. Alrighty, so first up on our list, and therefore the slowest cartridge on our list, is, if you can believe it, the 300 Precision Rifle cartridge, otherwise known as the 300 PRC. Now, admittedly, I do believe this one would be higher up on my list, but I couldn't find any lighter load data for it. I think this is mostly due to the fact that this is such a new cartridge, and the fact that this is a strictly long-range precision cartridge. So most of the loads I could find were 220 grain and above, so I really had to hunt to find a lighter projectile to at least help it place here somewhere. Because I know this is a very hot round, but the fact of the matter is I couldn't find any projectiles as light as the rest of them on our list, so this one unfortunately places at the bottom. I know that's not really fair, but it's just kind of how it went. I wanted to include this one because it's a cool cartridge. Developed by Hornady in 2018, the 300 PRC was actually created to meet the needs of the U.S. Special Operations Command, or SOCOM, to replace their current long-range precision cartridge, the 300 Win Mag, by exceeding its capabilities and being able to get a 50% or better hit probability at 2,000 yards and beyond with factory ammunition. And while SOCOM did not wind up adopting the 300 PRC, it did become very popular among ELR competitors, long-range shooting enthusiasts in general, and hunters alike, mostly due to its impeccable accuracy, very flat trajectories, and impressive knockdown power when reaching out to those extended ranges. The parent case for the 300 PRC is the beltless 375 Ruger, which is then neck down using a 30-degree shoulder, or with a 30-degree shoulder, as you probably see, to accept the .308-inch bullet. Now, this is one of the cartridges that I had to stray away from the Nozzler Low Data website because Nozzler didn't have anything below 200 grains. So the lightest I could find was, again, 165 grain load using 84.3 grains of R25 powder. With this combination, the load produces a very impressive 3,285 feet per second and 3,950 foot-pounds of energy, which is still very impressive and very hot for a 30 caliber load, just not as hot as the ones we're going to cover here in a second. Now, as far as energy goes, I think this one actually still ranks at the top, just because I couldn't find anything as light as the rest of them, so I'm sorry. Another thing is that if y'all want me to really dive into any of these cartridges in particular, you know, like as its own episode, I definitely will. Like I said, we're going to kind of keep it brief because we have 7 more to go over. Like the 300 PRC, from what I read about when I was doing this video, very cool round. Very cool. Very precise and everything. Like the way it's made is like has so much less tolerances or better it's a tighter fit. I don't know. It's a crazy cartridge. So that's one that I would like to look into more and do a whole episode about. So if y'all want to see that, just let me know. But with that, we're moving on. Up next in 7th place is one that's probably going to pee in some of y'all's Cheerios because it's quite a fan favorite. Not even on my channel, just in general with the shooting community. People love this round, and I'm sorry. We all know it. It's the legendary GOAT, the 300 Winchester Magnum, or as most of us call it, the 300 Win Mag. I know. What? The 300 Win Mag isn't almost, if not the fastest 30 caliber cartridge in the world? That's blasphemy. Well, turns out it's not. For at least from what I could find, the 300 Win Mag really didn't rank that high. That's why it's all the way down here on the list. I was very surprised myself. So, if you know I'm wrong, you're probably going to tell me anyway. But again, as far as the way I went about making this episode, this one ranked pretty low, which is, I know, it sucks, but it's just how it went. Introduced by Winchester in 1963, the 300 Win Mag was created as a new sniper round once again for the U.S. military that would exceed the long-range performance of its predecessor, the 30-06 Springfield, with its superior energy retention, trajectory, wind deflection, and accuracy out to 1,500 yards. The parent case for the 300 Win Mag was the 375 H&H belted Magnum by taking the taper out of the body, necking it down to a 308 and giving it a 25-degree shoulder. Boom, the 300 Win Mag was born. During testing, the 300 Win Mag was actually being put up against the 338 Lapua. However, the military kind of decided that the 300 Win Mag had enough oomph to get the job done, but in a slightly smaller, lighter, and more cost-effective package compared to the 338 Lapua, with the 300 Win Mag coming in at 2.62 inches and the 338 Lapua coming in at 2.72 inches. So, every little ounce counts and every little inch counts when you're out in the field because, again, when you're out there walking for miles, it matters. Cool little side note was that the 300 Win Mag was what Chris Kyle mostly used, so do with that information what you want. I just thought it was cool to throw it in here. Now, typically, just like every other round on this list, the 300 Win Mag does prefer a 200 plus grain projectile. It's more accurate and it carries the energy better out to long ranges. However, again, we're talking about speed today, so this round and I think every other round in this episode except for the last one, I believe, will be using a 125 grain projectile, which, yes, is extremely light, but we're talking about speed today, so praise Dale. Anyway, that little pill is backed by 84 grains of H4831 SC and comes screaming out of the barrel at a whopping 3,520 feet per second and 3,439 foot-pounds of energy. And in 6th place, interestingly enough, we have the earliest, if not one of the earliest 30 caliber Magnums. It goes by a handful of names, including the Super 30, which is what it was most commonly referred to in the beginning, the 300 Holland Holland belted Magnum, or just the 300 H&H Mag, which is what we'll be calling it today. Created by Holland Holland in 1925, the 300 H&H Mag was based on, you guessed it, the 375 H&H belted Mag. And also similar to the 300 Win Mag, it was also created to dethrone the 30-06 Springfield. Although one of the weird things about this round is pretty much unlike any round we're going to talk about today, it had an almost non-existent shoulder angle of like 8.5 degrees, which is weird. It was also very long with a case length of 2.85 inches, which is just weird. What's kind of funny, though, is that even though the 300 H&H ranks higher on our list today based off what I found on the load data, the 300 Win Mag actually did and still does outpace the 300 H&H when it comes to like off-the-shelf ammunition or factory ammunition. Just, again, from what Nalzer said, you can load the 300 H&H to shoot faster than the 300 Win Mag, which is crazy, but whatever. But speaking of those hot hand loads, once again, we have a 125 grain projectile being ejected out of the barrel by 74 grains of N550 powder at a whopping 3,602 feet per second and 3,601 foot-pounds of energy, which is kind of weird that the energy and velocity lined up so well, but from what I remember about the script, that's going to be a pattern from here forward. But this one was really close, which is crazy. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't think that the short-action mags would place as well as they did, but here we are, 2 or 3 cartridges into this list and they're only just now showing up. You would think these would be at the bottom, but they're not. But what do I know? I'm just an amateur YouTuber. But anyway, we are on the 5th fastest cartridge of the day with the 300 Remington Short Action Ultra Magnum, or 300 Rum Short, as we're going to be calling it today. So the 300 Rum Short was obviously created by Remington as an answer to Winchester's new short mag that they came out with that same year. See, the two companies were actually experimenting at the time with creating Magnum loads that could fit into short action rifles and keep up ballistically with their much taller and much more volumetrically superior older siblings. But what's crazy is how close they actually got to the cartridges that they were nipping at the heels of. I mean, we haven't even gone over the 300 WSM yet. It's in here somewhere, I promise. But evidently, you can load it faster than the 300 sorry, spoilers. See, this is where my ignorance kind of shows, because I'm not educated on this stuff at all. And again, I just look it up and try to research as much as I can. But with my uneducated way of thinking, or ignorant way of thinking, to me, and I think to a lot of people that don't know a lot about this, bigger case, more powder equals faster bullet. But obviously this isn't the case right now, because we're smack dab in the middle of this list and the short mags are only just showing up. I mean, we're talking case capacities of 30% less, and they're still nipping at the heels of their parent, the cartridges that they're directly based off of. I mean, it's crazy to me. In fact, Remington took it a step further by making their case an 1/8 inch shorter than their competitor, the 300 WSM. See, the round is loosely based on the beltless 404 Jeffries case and directly based off of the 300 Rum parent case, obviously. It also uses a less steep shoulder angle of 30 degrees as compared to the 35 degrees of the Winchester. This all leads to a reduced case capacity of 7.5%, again, compared to its direct competitor. However, Remington made up for this fact by creating a new bullet that would take up less case space. By increasing the lead content of said bullet, they could shorten up the slug itself while maintaining the same weight that everyone else was using. This was the new Remington Core-Lock Ultra. New at the time, obviously. Now, if you're not trying to keep up with the Jones and you're not hand loading, then in reality, whatever you buy off the shelf is going to wind up being a little bit slower than the Winchester version. That's just how it is. But to most people, it's not exactly detrimental. It's like, I mean, at most 100 feet per second. So it's not that big of a deal. But it mattered to them back then. But at the end of the day, when Nosler loaded these babies up with 125 grain projectile and packed them full with 70 grains of R550 powder, they were able to achieve a whopping 3,632 feet per second and 3,661 foot-pounds of energy. So, hey, can't complain there. Okay, I really hope that AC vent noise wasn't screwing up my audio. If it was, I am so sorry. And its ears simply must have been burning, because now we arrive at our number 4 spot with the 300 Winchester Short Magnum, or the 300 WSM, as I'll be calling it. Created in 2001 by Winchester themselves, the 300 WSM was once again created to get as close as ballistically possible to its full-size older sibling, but in a short-action package. Now, the 300 WSM did wind up becoming more popular than the 300 Rum Short, which to me makes no sense, because you remember when I mentioned that difference in shoulder angle where the 300 WSM uses a 35 degree shoulder angle and the 300 Rum uses a 30 degree shoulder angle? You see, that Remington will feed in just about anything that is chambered for 300 Rum Short. If it's chambered in it, you're going to be able to rack that thing and it'll run smooth, from what I've heard. Whereas the 300 WSM is extremely picky in what it lets feed it. From what I've read, if you use anything other than a very well-tuned and very well-aligned rifle, you're going to have a lot of trouble when you go to feed these little monsters. And as mentioned, with the extra case capacity, the WSM pretty much always outruns the Rum Short, so that's probably mostly exactly why it became more popular. Not to mention, I mean, Winchester may have just done better marketing, or it may have been timed better or something. It's kind of a toss-up. Like we mentioned, they're almost the exact same cartridge, so it doesn't really matter which one you have. They're both going to shoot great. No matter which one you get, you're not going to regret that you didn't get the other one. It's the same thing. Using 73 grains of W760 powder, Nosler has these 125 grain babies slinging out of the barrel at a whopping 3,661 feet per second and 3,720 foot-pounds of energy. So, like I said, not that much faster. There's not enough of a difference to care which one you have. It's really just which one they have in stock. Anyway, and lastly, a very neat fact about the 300 WSM is that it is the cartridge used for the current record holder for the Smallest 10-shot group at 1,000 yards with 2.656 inches. Yes, 2.656 inches, which is insane. That's a quarter MOA at 1,000 yards. Awesome. Next up on the plate, in third place, we have our first Weatherby of the day, the 300 Weatherby Magnum. And as stated directly on the Weatherby website, the 300 Weatherby Mag was created in 1944 by Roy Weatherby himself. However, it didn't hit the shelves until 1945. It was said that the 300 Weatherby Mag was 50 years ahead of its time, and I must agree, especially if they're talking about how fast they were cranking these things out in 1945. Well, not how fast they were producing them, how fast they were getting them going. Weatherby was known as the king of speed, or king of velocity, I think. He was a legend. Now, if you do the math in your head, the 300 Weatherby was produced 19 years before the 300 Win Mag. So why does it seem like the 300 Win Mag is a more popular cartridge and you hear about it more and you don't really hear about 300 Weatherby anymore? Well, a lot of that is really just due to the fact that not a lot of companies create or chamber rifles chambered in 300 Weatherby Mag. And almost double the amount of companies produce cartridges for 300 Win Mag. So it's just easier for the public to get their hands on. It's cheaper. You can get more rifles chambered in it. Whatever the public can get is what's going to be popular. That's just how it is. It doesn't matter if it's ballistically better all the way around. It's going to lose if it's not as accessible. But even with all that, the old 300 Weatherby Mag still ranks as one of the fastest 30 caliber cartridges in the world, especially on our list, coming in at 3,682 feet per second and 3,763 foot-pounds of energy. And that's achieved using 89 grains of RL-22 powder stuffed behind the same 125 grain projectile. So we've made it to our second place slot in today's episode. I'll admit I did have this one in first place because I was solely going off of the nozzler load data for all of them. But when I found some more stuff about our number one, our winner of the day, I just couldn't leave this one in the number one spot. I couldn't do it with a good conscience, especially because you guys were going to call me out on it because I'm sure y'all all knew about it and I didn't until I figured it out, again, by researching it. Anyhow, in second place, we have the 300 Remington Ultra Magnum, or the 300 Rum, as most of us know it. Released in 1999, the 300 Rum was obviously made by Remington and is pretty much just the long-action version of the 300 Rum Short that we were talking about earlier. It is, once again, based on the beltless 404 Jeffrey case. They take out the body taper, they give it the same 30-degree shoulder, and it also uses a Magnum-sized case head. Just like all the other cartridges in today's episode, they all use a Magnum case head. You have to use a Magnum bolt face on all of these. And as you could probably tell through a lot of these rounds, a lot of these companies were pretty much just measuring junk at this point. Do I blame them? No. Who doesn't want to have the biggest, baddest, fastest cartridge on the planet? And who doesn't want to have that title? So I say, measure on, gents. So what kind of numbers are we seeing out of our second place slot in our list today? Well, Nozzler's max load using 104 grains of RL-25 powder in the same 125 grain projectile, they were able to achieve 3,907 feet per second and 4,236 foot-pounds of energy, which is obviously nothing to scoff at. That is almost 4,000 feet per second using a almost third of an inch bullet. Even in the modern day with all the technology we have, that's still very impressive for a 30 caliber, but there's a reason that we have one left. It's been known as the fastest 30 caliber cartridge ever created, and it is at the very top of our list today. The 30378 Weatherby Magnum. Now, I will admit, the numbers I'm going to give you for this baby are not entirely confirmed. It's a lot of stories that I heard, but all these stories pretty much did line up. Anyway, we'll get into it in a second. In fact, off the Nozzler website, the 3378 loses to the 300 Rum. That's what I was talking about. I had them switch because I was just going off Nozzler, but I was like, no way. I've always heard that this is the fastest cartridge ever made. So I started looking into it, and that's when I found what I'm about to tell you. And that's because the 3378 Weatherby Mag was not created just to beat the competition. It was made for the U.S. military as a new anti-material, anti-personnel cartridge. You see, the U.S. military was experimenting with new armor, and they wanted to see how it held up to extreme velocity projectiles, so they asked Roy Weatherby, the king of velocity himself, to come up with something that could exceed 6,000 feet per second to test their new armor. So Roy promptly took his already existing 378 Magnum and necked it on down to 30 caliber. And considering the dude barely cut down the cartridge at all, it is the longest case we have on our list today, coming in at 2.913 inches for just the case length. If I had one, I'd show you, but I can't afford those things. as well as having a bolt face or a case head of 0.585 inches, which is right up there with the 338 Lapua. He then took a specially crafted 30 caliber 30 grain projectile and stuffed it on top of what was apparently a very large charge of the slowest burning powder available at the time. Using this powder and this projectile combination, he was able to achieve a whopping 5,000 feet per second, which, while very impressive, wasn't quite what the contract he was set out to fulfill wanted. He was told they needed a 6,000 feet per second projectile, and he didn't quite get there. So, mission failed. Then, a couple of years later, when a new slower burning, denser powder came out, he was apparently able to achieve his 6,000 feet per second goal and fulfill his contract and get paid. Now, unfortunately, most of this is just hearsay. I read a bunch of articles that mentioned this event happening, but there's no concrete evidence that this is true. I don't think anybody's done it since. So, again, a lot of it's hearsay, but it was just too cool and too impressive for me to just leave it out. If enough people say it's true, I kind of want to believe it. I do want to believe it. Unfortunately, a lot of reloaders also say that it's physically impossible, that you would need 230 grains of powder to get a bullet moving that fast, but I don't know. But you know what? Maybe, just maybe, it's not BS. And that's what put the 3378 Weatherby Magnum at the top of our list today, the rule of cool. Another pretty sweet little fact was that the 3378 Weatherby Mag was also a world record holder for the 1,000-yard 10-shot group with 3.4 inches, which was cool while it lasted, but obviously someone beat it. So anyway, folks, that's about it for today. I hope y'all enjoyed today's episode. I know I've been talking about doing this forever, but hey, I finally did it. I hope y'all like it. If you don't, I don't know what to do. I know this also is my first video in like 3 weeks. Again, I do apologize for that. This video should be coming out on Christmas Eve, so Merry Christmas. I hope y'all get what you want for Christmas, whether you have to buy it for yourself because you're, like a dad, or, hopefully your parents get you. I don't know. But hopefully you have a great Christmas. We'll see y'all next year, and don't forget to like, comment, hit that subscribe button, stay up to date on all of our cartridge adventures and everything in between. So, yeah, keep your brass polished, your powder dry, and always stay chambered in history. Thank you.